All right, so today, on a slightly truncated version, we're going to be talking about the H1B season for 2022, what you need to know. So, now there's a picture of me describing what I do. I'm partner in the Washington, D.C. office of Tully Rinckey. With the cap for 2022, it's a bit of a misnomer because this is technically fiscal year 2023 that we're talking about, because the federal fiscal year opens in October, and these are H1Bs that start in October. So these are the new fiscal year of H1Bs. So because we've got a little shorter time period, we're just going to do a little overview of H1Bs. What is an H1B? What are the basics? Also, we're going to talk about the cap. So what is the cap? You know, some of the best practices involved with the cap for attorneys, for employers, for individuals, I think is really important to outline sort of some of the key things to think about as you go through the process. And also I wanted to do a little overview of the times that were, the world that were, as it were, and also what's coming up. You know, what do we see on the horizon for H1Bs in fiscal year 2023, and also probably this summer as well. Longer term, there's also a few things we'll touch on as well. So H1Bs right now. I think it's what was the description, that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger? I think we've seen H1Bs be the focus of a lot of anti-immigrant rhetoric for the last four or 5 years with the Trump administration. Interestingly, H1Bs have been slightly less impacted by COVID-19. It's kind of felt in other parts of the immigration system. We can also look at the huge demand that still exists for H1B visas. There's quite a lot of demand out there. I think when we talk about that, when we get to the cap, Forbes has some great research right now that's showing yearly, you're looking at 1.5 million tech vacancies. I think that's probably figures a little ridiculous, but you only have 56,000 new H1Bs in the tech industry each year with the cap. So that gives you an idea that, although tech industry dominates H1Bs and discussion of H1Bs, it's not the be all end all, but it is definitely over half of the new H1Bs go to tech companies. Also, we're looking at some of the areas of H1Bs that get a lot of stick is compensation. Average H1B compensation has been found by the Congressional Research Service to be high. Average is about 101,000. This is the same or higher than US workers. Also, there's a lot of added costs for H1Bs. Just the filing fees alone with an H1B petition, you're looking at, in some cases, over 3,000, could be even more. So there's a significant amount of expense with H1Bs, let alone legal fees that are very reasonable at Tully Rinckey. Anyway, we also currently have a new focus for STEM grads. The recent Biden administration actions with expanding STEM OPT into 22 new fields is really sort of paving the way, I think, for multiple student-related improvements to the H1B system and also the OPT system. So I think we're in a much better place than maybe we were in 2019. Looking back we'll be looking at that in a little bit. So moving on, what are the key agencies here? So just so we have some terminology as we move forward, the USCIS, US Citizenship and Immigration Services, the key education agency for H1Bs, the Department of Labor. They also swoop in and out because they oversee the LCA program. They also adjudicate prevailing wages, and they also are an enforcement mechanism for H1Bs. So the DOL is highly linked to H1Bs. A lot of the policies that have come and gone have been linked to the Department of Labor and how the Department of Labor looks to oversee the H1B program. Yeah, the Department of State, I put in overlooked. I mean, I think especially recently, the importance of the Department of State with H1B adjudication has come to the forefront. COVID-19, I said COVID-19 didn't really hit H1Bs, but what it did hit was the Department of State with the closure of embassies worldwide. Also, of course, the H&L ban. Let's not forget that. This is these kind of impacts are affect all parts of immigration law, but specifically, H's and the Department of State's interpretation of age guidance is really key. The other ones I wanted to list were the Kentucky Consular Center, who are the essential intermediary between the USCIS and DOS. Also, you've got the FDNS, that's the Fraud Investigative Services. Be sure to call your local immigration attorney if they come knocking. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has been sort of in the background of a lot of H-1Bs, but has come into stark review for the last few years with attempts to change the wage computation methods for the prevailing wages for H-1Bs. Finally, Social Security Administration, they're also always involved on the back end for H-1Bs. Sources of law here, we don't need to go into these too much. Suffice to say, we tend to be looking at the INA, looking at 8 CFR and 20 CFR. Those are the real sort of guiding areas of law. The policy memos and precedent decisions really inform what we do, though. And throughout all H-1B practice, especially CAP cases, I recommend the Department of Labor FAQs are crucial in understanding how the underlying labor condition applications work. So what is an H-1B? This is the little section that I was going to do as H-1B 101. I'm going to truncate it because of the time here, but you can see the definition of H-1Bs in the INA. Individuals coming temporarily to the United States to work in a specialty occupation or a fashion model. Of course, we had a H-1B fashion model as the first lady for a few years. That, however, did not change their opinion of H-1Bs, but that's a different subject. The key aspects of an H-1B, though, is individuals that are coming temporarily, so there's a temporaneous nature to it. It also goes through a petition process, so it's a petition to the USCIS. That means evidence up front. Immigration attorneys spend most of their time preparing evidence for up front. It's very difficult to fix stuff on the back end, so get your ducks in a row for these. H-1Bs are also defined by their speciality, by the position being a specialty occupation, and the qualifications that match. We're going to go into that a little further. Finally, all H-1Bs have to be supported by a labor condition application, which certifies the terms of employment and the wages paid to the individuals. So specialty occupations, the definition of a theoretical and practical application of a body of highly specialized knowledge really is critical to an H-1B, but it's two parts. There is the theoretical and practical application, and then the attainment of a bachelor's degree is specific for entry into that occupation. So you've got to think of it as two parts. It's not just, oh, I have a bachelor's degree and this job's okay. No, your bachelor's degree has got to be specific for that position. And this is what the USCIS looks at when they're considering. To be honest, if they actually go through a 1, 2, 3, 4 step process of analyzing a position. If it's not clear cut, certain positions are very clear cut with their specialty occupations, engineers, actually written in the law, also doctors, things along that nature. But when you're in areas where it's a little, you're in a gray area, you're looking at, the Department of Labor, then you're looking at the BLS to see whether it is a common position. These are the 4 factors that the Department of Labor and the USCIS will look at in determining whether a position is a specialty occupation, and also what the degree requirement is. So it's always that 2-step analysis. So we talked about these being petitions. Petitions, as I said, they're fun. You got to load up that information up front. You're also looking at the beneficiary qualification. That can involve very detailed analysis of the individual qualifications for the position. There also has to be an employee-employer relationship. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And a certified labor condition application. All petitions also have to make a request. Just benefit, but there also has to be a request for action. That can be change of status. So student changing status to H-1B, extension of status, that obviously doesn't really apply for new H-1Bs, or for a visa to be picked up abroad. So there's also a 2-step part to all H-1B petitions, and you've got to follow the rules. If you want to look at them, just pull up the USCIS website. They have them all listed there, and they even put the list, every cap year, they put a list of how they want the evidence laid out. Follow it to the T, and be good to go. Other things about H-1Bs, we won't really go into these too much. There's a maximum of 6 years in status. Status is tied to the petitioner. The petitioner is the company. If the company goes away, the H-1B goes away. Also, if the petitioner is taken over, acquired, there has to be specific actions for the H1B employees to follow that petitioner. So that is an intrinsic link. All H1Bs must be offered return transportation should their H1B end. And that offer people tend to forget, but it can be enforced. Also, there is a status for dependents. It is H4. H4 dependents can also obtain EADs in very limited circumstances, depending on whether the individual has a pending green card application of certain types. So what is the annual cap? The annual cap is 85,000 H1Bs. Technically, there are 65,000 and then another 2,000 for individuals who hold advanced degrees. That's what we refer to when we talk about the cap. So as I described, the cap is for individuals that begin work on October 1, 2022. If you're selected in the cap and you file a petition with the USCIS that does not have a start date of October 1, 2022, it will be denied. So bear that one in mind. Very rough, those cases. So the cap has been around for some time, and it used to be the case that complete petitions were filed. So full fees, full applications, all the supporting evidence. We would have immigration firms would be filing 20,000 cases at a time. I've filed 60 one year. That ridiculousness ceased in 2020 when the adoption of an electronic lottery for the H1B cap was put into place. It's definitely easy. It does have its complexities though, and you do have to follow it. It is, however, cheap. The filing fee for an application is only $10. It also, one of the great benefits I think of the electronic lottery for, hopefully it will be integrated more into an online filing system, but is the ease of control by the USCIS. Because the 85,000-ish, I should say, 85,000-ish H1B visas that are supposed to be issued every year, those can be reclaimed under the law and the regulations. But the USCIS had no way to do that for the last however long when the caps weren't met. So when the caps were fully met, they had no way to reclaim visas that weren't used, visas that got denied, things like that. Because everything is electronic, they are able to reclaim those visas, and we'll look at the second rounds a little bit later. So the H1B cap, what are your chances? So these figures are a little intimidating. So fiscal year 2021, you had 274,000 applications. This is for 85,000 available visas. And fiscal year 2022, wow, 308,000 applications with 37,000 different employers, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. Amazon being the top one there. In terms of applications, you had 48% of the applications were filed via the master's cap. So that's a lot of US grads filing for these. Of course, STEM OPT individuals tend to have essentially 3 to 4 chances to file for the cap. So you get the situation where individuals with advanced degrees apply several years in advance whilst they're working on their OPT. One way to get employed outside in H1B status outside of the cap is just to avoid it. Like, who be bothered with all this electronic lotteries and stuff? Cap exemptions exist, and they are outside of the limit. Technically, actually, the 20,000 H1Bs are exempt, but they're considered part of the cap. It's just the way it's worked out. But there are certain ways around the H1B cap. Physicians with J1 waivers, institutions of higher education, affiliated nonprofit entities or research organizations, those are all exempt from the cap. You have to file those applications with the California Service Center. They are the guardians for the cap exemption. So the California Service Center is pretty hawkish on enforcing exemptions from the H1B cap. I think they are pretty wary of the whole process. But great things about cap exempt employers is you don't have to abide. There are no different filing guidelines. There's no timelines. You just file when you want. Of course, individuals who have already been counted in the H1B cap can apply whenever they want to extend their status or change their employer. Looking at the timeline for the lottery, we're probably going to be having USCIS instructions pretty soon, probably in the next mid-February, I would say, maybe early February. We'll see. The registration period will likely be to the 20th, going by the way the weeks fold out this year. After that period is up, so that's the period when it's time to get everything, get your registration done, get your applications in. The lottery is then conducted. They run the lottery by doing the master's cap first, so the first 20,000 available visas. Then everybody that didn't, so we think of the last figure, we're looking at 48% of that 300,000 figure, is then put back into the pot with everybody else, and then they run the regular lottery. This is an interesting part of the electronic system. Previously, this was reversed with the paper lottery, but this definitely is a benefit for individuals who hold US master's degrees. They get two sort of bites of the apple, if you will. We're then looking at the filing period that opens April 1st. This is when individuals that are selected in the lottery can begin the process of applying for their H1B visa. If you're selected, you're given a 90-day window following the lottery to apply. And then this is what I mentioned earlier about the benefits of the electronic filing system, is that individuals can, the USCIS can have additional rounds of lottery. So there has been historically a second round in August, and there's even been a third round in November, which happened last year, in order to use up all of the available numbers. So there's a lot of, there's some issues with the electronic system, but this is a real benefit for all H1B employers. And that's key, this part, that they will do secondary rounds. It's really important that employers, attorneys, potentially applicants keep up to date on their My USCIS account, because they won't tell you by a post that's just going to pop up in the system. So what are some of the best practices? Well, obviously, keep up your account, but I think you have to start early, right? Like end of January, individuals should be well into thinking about applying for the cap at this point. I think asking a lot of questions really is key. I always go with the why approach. Who's the beneficiary? What's their degree? You don't want to run into that on the back end after you're selected and you're like, oh, there's an issue with this degree. Going into degrees and H1Bs is probably outside the scope of this, so I'm not going to touch on it. What are they doing? Is it a specialty occupation? You want to check that in advance, because you don't want to get to the second part of filing the H1B petition to find out that it's not a specialty occupation. Also, where is it going to be done? That's key for the next question, which is why. How much is the person going to be paid? Also, potentially it's where are they going to be located? They're going to be located off-site. If they're going to be located off-site, how are they going to be controlled? Those are key questions for H1Bs that need to be addressed early, rather than finding that out later down the road and then you're scrambling to get the petition together. All of this files into preparation for the LCA, because the LCA is a key document in the H1B process. Some of this is advice for attorneys. You've got to have a filing plan ready. And then lastly, I want to underscore the don't give up after the first round. These, especially last fiscal year, seeing the multiple rounds of cases, really was fantastic for employers, but you've got to make sure that you've got your USCIS account up and running. And this brings me on to the top 2 errors reported by the USCIS for fiscal year 2022. So last year was the wrong type of account. So individuals using the wrong type of account to file a cap H1B. The registrant account is for employers. You can only have one per employer. The applicant account, obviously, is per applicants, and the attorney account. You've got to make sure that the registrant account and the attorney account is money under that account. You can file as an attorney, you're an employer, you can file, I think it's $250 per account, so fun times. Beneficiaries can be entered. So the second error that they got was beneficiaries entered multiple times. Each beneficiary that's added into an account, so a registrant account from an employer, is given a unique code. You can only list someone once. If they're listed twice, both those and they're selected, both those cases are going to get thrown out, so the person will lose their shot at the cap. There is a database tool built into the USCIS account to check if you've got a lot of cases. That's what you want to be looking for. And if you've done it by actually put someone in twice, you can just delete them. It's very easy. But when the cap closes, your chance to delete is gone. So you really want to be careful on that one. A little quick note on LCAs, really important. They are available for online filing. If we have time, but it's got to be something in the back of everybody's mind that the LCA process is critical and compliance is also critical. You've got to have it. You've got to be thinking even before cases are entered into the system. Will they be sufficient? Is the job location and salary information correct for the LCA purposes? So COVID, how is the cap being affected by COVID? I think we touched on this earlier. There's the direct effects are sort of less. Instead, it's delays across all the board. Delays in visa processing, delays in USCIS processing. If you don't premium process stuff, for a while it wasn't getting done. USCIS had their own problems to deal with. I guess the big things for COVID and H1Bs were the no benching rule. So H1Bs can't be benched. That is, if you bench an H1B employee, so tell them to stop working, you have to still pay them. And I haven't seen too many cases of that recently related to COVID, but that's always the big concern with a period where companies are in flux and people being removed out of work, stuff like that. Which brings me to the next point, which is probably the most COVID-related H1B issue, and that's telecommuting. So I put in the language from the CFR there. To paraphrase most of this, if you're telecommuting with an H1B, or you think there's going to be telecommuting, you have to consider that when you're thinking about the cap case. Is this individual going to be remote? Where are they going to be working from? If they're working from Montana, but the job is in New York City, well, they can't be paid Montana wages. They've got to be paid the higher of the two there. And if you get into the phase where there is employment outside of the intended area of employment listed in the LCA, you're potentially looking at having to file an amended H1B petition with a new LCA and incur the review of USCIS again. Short-term placement options do exist for working at home for a couple of days. Those kind of things can exist for H1Bs. There are sort of there's a 30 days a year, 60 days a year sort of limits on those. They're fairly advanced. The DOL FAQs go into them. But longer term, if you're still within the same metropolitan statistical area, telecommuting can work. But there is still a factorial analysis and a posting requirement. So if individuals are maybe going to be going somewhere else, you got to do your best practices and make sure, as an employer, as an attorney, or as the individual, that there is a posting notice updated in the LCA file. So the cap, how do we get here? So I actually stole this slide from a presentation on H1Bs that I did in 2019, which was right in the middle of all of this. And I just wanted to list some of the Trump administration executive actions that affected H1Bs for the last few years. So we had Buy American, Hire American, which by itself didn't affect anything too much, but put in a blanket, if this is going to be adverse to US workers, you can deny it rule. I don't know whether I saw that enforced too much. And the rest of these executive actions really tried to, through policy, dismantle the H1Bs specifically for computer-related positions. The guidance on computer-related positions withdrew long-standing guidance that basically stated that all computer tech-related positions for H1Bs were considered specialty occupations. Once they did that, they then moved on to the deference memo, the deference executive order action that basically said if you had a prior approved petition in this category, we don't care, we're going to adjudicate it again. And you saw a lot of people that had H1Bs for decades, they're Indian nationals potentially, being denied when they applied to extend their H1Bs. And this is what we saw, denials. And these denials hit new cap H1Bs. So that figure of 24% denial rate of new H1Bs in 2018 was killer. You saw it again in 2019. 2020 was pretty interesting because several of these orders were vacated by courts. So you had a 21% denial matching 2019 that then moved to 4% when all of the adverse actions were beginning to be removed. One thing that's crucial here is dependents were probably the worst hit. And they also got hit by COVID too, because the Trump administration added a biometric requirement to dependent applications. And biometrics, is, of course, is going into a USCIS field office, getting a photo taken and fingerprints done. It added months, if not years, to dependent applications. This then got multiplied by the COVID-19, when USCIS field offices were shut. People didn't want to go anywhere. They had staffing issues. It was basically a huge mess. Some of the real choice actions that the Trump administration tried to put through, I wanted to outline as well. They tried to implement a change to the lottery that would make it entirely wage-based. So who got paid the most? This would be, I don't know how they would update the electronic registration. That would have been a nightmare. How do you verify it? It's ridiculous. And then you had universities, the university system just went ballistic. So also recent graduates, this is the pathway for certain doctors, recent graduates to get into the workforce on the H1B program is based at their entry level. And certain university doctors, wow, they have a great opportunity to work in the United States on H1B status, but they're not going to be paid necessarily as much as private doctors, and they just lost their minds. Luckily, this all went away. The strengthening wage provisions is a complex one, but basically it was an attempt to skew the wage rates for all H1B applicants and also green card applicants by changing the basis of analysis to find the median wages for position, and it would have increased wages by probably 35% by instead of taking just instead of taking medians from the true median, they would have moved the median to a much higher level. Luckily, we don't have to worry about those too much because the Northern District of California vacated these DHS efforts. Everybody used merits arguments, but ultimately they went with the ground that acting DHS Secretary Chad Wolf did not have the authority to issue these regulations. This also is what happened to the EB-5 regulations that got thrown out too. And then the Biden administration ended them. So what has the Biden administration been up to? Well, we've seen expanded OPT, which is the expanded work authorization for STEM graduates, move to 22 new subjects, which is fantastic. A lot of them are data-based, technically it would be data-based, but no, they're based on data analysis and financial analysis. There's also some climate change areas of study. It's really exciting. I hope that we're going to see more STEM things in the future. We'll touch on that a little bit. There's also a big expansion, which is something that I was involved with the White House on permanent resident options for STEM graduates. So that's also, going to be a big benefit coming down the pike. So coming on to what's coming down the pike. So thank you to Joe Manchin. We don't have comprehensive immigration reform in the immediate horizon. Build Back Better is not building anything back anytime soon. H1B regulatory reform is still on the regulatory agenda for the DHS. I think they want to look at off-site employment. They want to address it in a more reasonable way than the Trump administration. And there's talk of that being in the second quarter of 2022. We'll have to see. The wage changes, as we talked about, are dead. They're looking at a way to improve students, so STEM grads, going from F1 to H1B. And I think, generally the H1B processing is going to be improved because they really want consistency in adjudications. They also have to rehire a significant amount of people across the agency. And in order to hire all those people, they're going to increase their fees. They're going to increase a lot of them. We've got several fee schedules on the horizon. USCIS are looking at a broad selection of fees. Department of State has confirmed some fee increases, and the main one is all petition non-immigrant visas, which are usually at 190, are going almost doubling to 310. Thank you, Department of State. Put in premium processing for everyone, but there is significant chatter that premium processing for dependents, for EADs, and for certain I-140 petitions is going to be on the cards for second quarter of this year, if not sooner. So it's already authorized by statute, by regulation. USCIS has to implement it, and that implementation is actually pending at OMB right now. Because it is a fee increase, it's going to pass OMB review. So yeah, we'll have to see when that comes in. Also, a couple of things I kind of sped through a lot of this, but it is it's interesting that enforcement is still around. People like to think that like a narrative of Biden being lenient. Obama was not lenient. Biden follows the same path. The Facebook settlement is a great example. They discriminated against applicants for permanent residency, or they looked for immigrant applicants for positions and didn't consider US-based applicants. And it was a nearly $5 million penalty plus compensation that I think is around the $10 million mark. So it's huge, and it does have lasting impacts for perm applications, the terms of that settlement. So visa delays, that's going to be the world that we live in for the next, I don't know, probably until 2024. That's what Department of State is estimating, that they'll be back to normal. Employment-based visas have been on the lowest tier of processing for the Department of State. There's nothing to suggest that's going to change. However, we've seen certain offices for non-immigrant visas and business visas opening up and beginning to process things relatively quickly. And we've also seen the Department of State really expand the interview waiver for H1Bs, Ls, and Os, etc. They've really tried to reduce their workload. And we've even seen, which is quite interesting, the start of virtual interviews, things along that nature. They are really looking at ways to use tech to address their backlog. And that is a stated priority for the USCIS and the Department of State. I think, they've got, for USCIS, I think they're hoping that the premium processing system the expanded premium processing will help. There is some debate about whether they have the capabilities in place to fulfill the hundreds of thousands of premium processing requests they're about to receive, but that remains to be seen. We'll be putting a copy of probably the recording of the session, and some of the materials are going to be available, so be sure to check us out online. And that's it from me. Thank you very much.